Okay, is that what we're going to do? We're going to close this call and somebody will host again?
No,
we just
have a guy. Justin is recording, or
you
Jay.
you're already in a new one, a new call now.
Yeah, we're already in the new call.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just kind of throw around the court stuff and stuff, because last time I didn't get to nail on a couple of things that I missed that I find that are really important, and I wanted, if you guys will just give me a minute, I'd like to tackle that first before anybody even asks me any questions, because it's kind of important.
Okay.
Because just for the new guys, your claims are, there's no court date in the claim. You get your court dates from your motions. If whatever your motion is for that hearing for that motion only deals with that motion and the things that you're dealing with in that motion. You're not having a trial. So if you're making a motion to stop something, you stop somebody from being able to file any more motions or anything else, that's all that hearing is for, right? So you're going to be spending that couple $100 for a motion, right, to just deal with that. That's all you're going to deal with. If you start dealing with if you try to, they call it fast tracking the law, and that's why they toss out claims, because people try to jump to the next, right, jump to trial in that motion to a stop, right, or any other motion, right? That motion is just to deal with what that motion is about, nothing else. And once that motion is done, you can even before that hearing is done, you can file verbally with the judge, right, and make another hearing. You don't have to wait for that hearing to close, right, and go make another hearing, right? You can actually motion for another hearing right there. So if you've stopped your opponent, and this is why it's important that you kind of look through the whole court procedures and understand what motions that could come after, what motions your opponents could be filing against you, and what motions that you're going to be filing against your opponents, and kind of come up with a basic structure on how this stuff is all going to lay out before you start. Because let's say you're in a motion for estoppel and you get it. If you don't have your affidavits done and kind of prepared, right? So you can just run home and toss a couple things together and you're done, because you basically kind of were already prepared what you're going to be filing when and so on and so forth. You're just waiting for the last little bit of information to drop in there to complete it. And the reason why is, and it seems like all lawyers already have this format set up, because if you stop your opponent right there on a motion today, you can make the court date for tomorrow if there's an open slot, right? So you can right, and that's it. And I'm sure everybody's seen that at the end of the court date, right? Even in common law, right? And at the end of that motion, right, that they're already scheduling for something else, right? And that's because they're prepared for that next motion that they know that they're gonna have to do to get to that finish line, right? So that's why it's important for us to have an idea of how many, what's the minimum amount of motions that you're gonna have to do, and be prepared for those. right? And also maybe be prepared for a couple of emotions that the opposing party can come at you with, right? Because we already kind of have an idea of how the government likes to come up with OPCA things and stuff like that, and we already have all the laws to refute that and change that jurisdiction and the assumption to it. So we can see that by having this information early and kind of planning for it, we can easily determine, okay, well, this will probably be around 4 motions, and that's about it. Does that kind of make sense? Can anybody hear me? Hello?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So where should I start now? Where would you guys like to start? Would you guys just want to start asking questions, or? Because as you can see, the court procedures are actually getting a lot more simpler, and the mystery behind it is going away. Is it not?
Okay, I'm just going to say that your claim, like you said, is just trying to keep it down or keep it as brief as possible, possibly a paragraph, and that's about it. And then from that point, you're bringing a motion to support your original claim to the court, so you can be heard before the court. Is that correct?
Yes. So, okay, let's just with that claim part. It's important that we realize that every numbered sentence or paragraph, because you can write so much that it turns into a paragraph, we want to write those as small as possible and with only the determining factors, because they have the choice. They have to accept or deny each one. That's it. They just have to accept or deny it. The catch comes in that if there's anything in that sentence or paragraph that they can deny, they can deny the whole paragraph. So that's why it's important when we're writing our summary that we don't write great big paragraphs, right? And that we keep it as small as possible and as blunt and to the determining factors only. You see what I'm getting at? Because when we do that, they have a lot. Right? We're restricting them to a finer, right? You see what I'm getting at? Where they won't be able to deny it. And if they do deny it, we have the law that proves that they're wrong, right? And that's exactly what the claim. That's exactly what the whole foundation of that claim is about: is to tell your story without evidence in it, but to tell it in a summary where your opposing party has to admit or deny everything in it. So you want them to deny everything in it, and you want to be able to have the proof for it, right? And if they accept everything in it, that's even better, because then you can just go for a default judgment right off the hop, right? Because they already accepted that they did all these things, right? So now it's just a fact of law, right? It's when one of them disputes one of those things, that's when we have to deal with it in a motion, right? See what I'm getting at? Because all those things are a determining factor for your case, right? So that's why after that motion, once you file your claim, you have certain amount of motions available to you right off the hop. Not all of them, but only some, right? Like notice to admits and things like that, to start getting the evidence into the court, where the opposing party has to admit or deny getting them, or receiving them, seeing them, that type of thing. It's not admitting or denying the validity of them or anything else. It's just whether they've gotten them before and got notice of them. That's what a notice of admit is for. And once you've sent in that claim, you have so many days to send it. Well, you have so many days, and it's a long time, because from the time that you send notice of claim to the opposing party does the timer start. So you could go make a claim today and wait 2 weeks before actually sending notices of those claims. Not till the parties receive the claim does their clock start. From the time they have to give you a reply.
Delivery. Yeah.
That's it. So it's within that, once you get that reply, now basically almost all the other writs and motions are available to you. Right? So once you get that reply, then that's going to, right, once you get that reply, when you see what they deny and what they accept, is going to basically tell you what's going to be coming for motions from their side. Right? Because you kind of see what I'm getting at, right? It's already going to tell you kind of what they're going to be doing, and that's why it's important that you're always the first one to make claim, even in equity or anything else, because of that fact right there alone, just on how the claim works and how they have to admit and deny it, right? And the information that I'm going to get by you admitting and denying is going to tell me exactly how you're going to be going at this case, right? So that's why by kind of pre-looking at the motions and what you're going to be writing for a summary in your claim should tell you, right, especially with their experiences on the motions that they're going to be filing to try to stop you from getting that claim, right? So that's and once, and what was that other half of that question you had, David?
Well, no, you've already sort of answered the other half of that question.
Oh, I did? Okay.
The one thing, what capacity are you coming in bringing that claim in? I guess just as the court person, correct? The original claim.
None of these are going to work unless you are deforced. You have to literally be forced.
All right.
You don't think about doing any of this stuff, right? Until you're actually divorced. Because if you're still acting as trustee, it's the same thing as you quitting your job and keeping the truck.
Right. Okay.
You kind of see what I'm getting at? Like, you got that thing?
No, yeah, it's a good reminder. I remember that was been said before, but of course, with all this information and reading, it gets lost somewhat. So,
and that's why anytime anybody has just fire it out there, because if you're unsure about it, you got to know. We got to start learning what these contracts are and every bit about it, and that means that when you don't know, we can't read minds. So tell us, and we'll do everything we can to help everybody get the information and read the information, right? And so they can learn it themselves, right? Because we don't.
To be honest, I haven't read a lot about divorced yet. But would that also entail that you've also made a land claim before then you can be divorced? Considered divorced because you have to have that claim first, and then of course not be a part of any other contract in the public, for instance, the name being on mortgages or such.
That's right, yeah. So,
okay.
How does the control person relate to being divorced? Because the control person is like, they're already past that part.
Well, just remember, because everything's a choice. So if you choose to go from the citizen and just be, let's say you choose just to release everything and go move out to the bush, like what I was going to do, right? Like I was prepared to do that. I've been trying to actually do that and just get away because I just hated everything about the system so bad. They just won't let me get away, right? They just cost me too much money to be able to acquire that, right? So the biggest thing is that it's all a choice. So if you choose just to send in the release and go live in the bush, you can do that, right? if you only want to, let's say, vest your lands and not care about your corporate shares or any of those other things, you can do that. If you can, it's mix and match. It's up to you what you want to do and how you, what you choose to vest and what you don't. You have a bunch of warranties available to you. What you choose to claim for warranty and vest is up to you. Right? Like how far you want to take it. You can either take it all the way, you can take it halfway, right? It's really up to every individual. And that's why we can't really give legal advice. We can't do anything for anybody else because it's really their choice, right? The best that we can do is have discussions, help people find the law, right? Toss things around like this, right? And that's about it, right? Give our opinion on what we would do, right? And that's really it.
I guess I was really saying about when we were talking about last time on the last call, like if the person has moved into a position where they're in eligible or a control person. If they're a control person, then technically they're doing a function of government.
Yeah.
Or no?
No, because a function of government is somebody that's acting as a strict function of government. So that means that you're actually hired as an officer, a minister, or some actual function of that corporation, right? You work for the municipality, right? That type of thing.
They'll do like an oath. An oath is required to make it.
Exactly, yeah. It'll be another contract over and above being a citizen.
Well, then that brings up the other question. And so, in relationship to acquiring this control position, again, should that first go through after your claim has been made?
From what I see, it doesn't matter. You can probably do it at the same time as your claim. I need money, like drastically, so I can vest. So I'm going after it now. I'm planning on having this sent in for Monday next week because the government's already familiar with me. Like me and the government, we've been doing this for a long time. And the only thing is, they haven't been able to find me vexatious and frivolous. So, right?
That's
so,
right. You'd be on that terrorist list.
Yeah. So, I've been in court and everything else more than all these other gurus, I think, combined. Like, really, the government has not left me alone. Like, they've taken everything. Like, I had over $1 million worth of assets. I have nothing.
So they
that's
took
motivation.
Well, no, I had a corporation, and I had commercial snow removal company with like big equipment and land and properties, and I even had land that had over $1 million worth of peat moss on it, right? And that was before I was somebody lit the light bulb what this really was, right? Like, and then it was just like, okay, I just can't do this anymore, and I stopped doing business at all, stopped working completely, and they kept coming after me. They took my land, right, saying that I had a third-party security interest when there wasn't one, but I did claim my lands, and I did do a release, and I claimed the lands that I was living on. So, as you can see, that would be the third-party security agreement, right, that they took the lands for, because I can't injure myself, right? So, because I was pushing it the way they did, they took my lands, and all the court processes and everything else, because I chose not to work, right, thinking that, like, with the way the gurus are saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, and all this other shit, it's wrong. Right, we have keep playing the corporate person till you're ready to vest. Hey, no matter what, you have to make the money in order to vest. You need a house over, you need a roof over your head till you're ready to vest. Then become divorced. This is a poker game. People can do it with such ease. You don't have to lose anything. You don't even have to lose any sleep. Right? We just have to realize what the agreement is, how to get out of it, and plan it properly. Right? Don't send in your IDs and that stuff. Like, it just doesn't, like, it's not going to get you anywhere except for them to come and attack you. Right? So
just to clarify, William, you're saying that you have to deforest. You've got to the timing's crucial to this, because one version of this that I heard many years ago was that you might have to fund yourself for a 90-day period between divesting yourself of everything you have that could be construed as coming from a benefit of their public, and then stepping into basically the private capacity and having your own lands. So do you go along with that 90 days? Could it be shorter than that? Is it likely to be longer?
I totally agree with that, but I would say that most people won't be able to do this in 90 days. And everything and if we look at law, the only time that they write a law is because somebody needs to be restricted because they keep doing that to somebody when they're not supposed to be doing it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So if we look at the laws of reversion, they wouldn't have a continual claim, and they wouldn't say that we have the right to keep making a claim every single year if required.
That's correct.
So
yeah.
That's why I'm already divorced. I'm camping. I'm prepared for the long run. It doesn't matter how long it takes me. But if I would have planned properly, and did the wrong things that I did before, and I actually had money, I could actually be doing this in style right now. And when you look at how cheap camping can be and living in living in a rustic manner, even if it took you 2 years, how much do you think it would cost most people to be able to sustain themselves for 2 years without working to vest their estate? And I'm saying 2 years, and that would be probably the most drastic scenario possible. It really depends on you and how much you're willing to read and what you're willing to do. But yes, I completely agree on that, and I think it's more than 90 days, but I would say a minimum of 90 days. There's some things in law that I've been reading that, like there's this writ called ejection a forme. I'll try to type it in the room. I'll try to type it.
So during those 90 days, you're supposed to live without taking any benefit, which would include the use of their money system, right?
Well, no, because don't forget, you're allowed. That's the only thing that you can take with you is money, right? Kind of see what I'm getting at as the corporate person, but we can't go take lands by force.
No. Right? Well, they do. It's called occupation, but yeah, okay.
Okay, but that's only if nobody is on that land. If you want to go and claim crown land that nobody has, yes, you can you can make a claim before you go to those lands, and then go to those lands.
Okay.
If the government comes and tries to remove you, you have to leave. Because by you trying to stay on that property by force by anyone, even if it's a fee simple, some jackass drunk comes walking out of the bush and tells you to fuck off, leave. Because because as soon as there's an injury, right, you've now broken the natural law, because why are you trying to fight with somebody that doesn't have any authority? When if you go to the courts, they're going to give you the deed of release and your confirmation under seal, and no one will ever be able to do it again. You see what I'm getting at? So because the people in that jurisdiction are completely bound, right? We are not allowed to go and use force because our force is that writ, right? And our knowledge to go to the proper person to force their subjects to a torn, right? And that's why so many people, when they go into court and they challenge jurisdiction and they fail, the judge just keeps attorneying for them. You don't have to accept this, right? You see, you know what I'm getting at? I've been through it lots. I know what happens.
I can see.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like all these people that try to say, well, they got this thrown out and that, from what they were saying, I know it's a crock of shit because I've done the exact same thing, and it's either gotten me where the judge gets really pissed off, where it puts you in a really bad spot, or it actually gets you thrown out of the courthouse like a junk out of a bar, where 6 bailiffs come and grab you, pick you up, and use your head to open up the door and take you right out, and then right out onto the parking lot, right from the courtroom, not let your feet touch the ground once.
Yeah.
Right. I've been in that position probably 10 times. Right.
Wow.
No, I'm serious. Like,
I've been in it once, but they arrested me when they got me out of the courthouse and out of the building, and then they brought me back in after arresting me.
Oh, really?
This should be simple.
They've never arrested me in court, and they've never found me in contempt of court.
No, they never found me in contempt of court. They just, painted a bunch of pictures, got me out of the courtroom, and then just had 4 other, without handcuffing me, and they said I was free to go, but they never did say I was free to go. But they all 6 of them,
you were doing
me out to the courthouse.
You were doing the name
thing?
No?
No, actually, no. I was actually standing up for someone else, and it was the Supreme Court. And I only gave my first name because that's all the judge asked for. What's your name? And I always give my first name. And that's it. They brought me out to the sidewalk, then arrested me and brought me back in to the slammer.
Nothing surprises me. It really.
Yeah.
You know. Where would we like to go to next? It's very close, the name of that writ, ejection for me. And this is supposed, from my understanding, this is supposed to be used in conjunction with your writ of entry. From my understanding is, as soon as the writ of entry is accepted, you immediately stop the judge and file immediate motion on the spot right then and there with the ejection for me. What this ejection for me is supposed to do is it's supposed to have the sheriff immediately go to the property, or because what we're talking about is property, and seize the property in the sheriff's hands and do accounting of all the waste on the property. So immediately, that day, the sheriff will go and take those lands out of the hands of whoever is holding those lands. And then you can make it. Then you should be dealing with another motion on when you can come back to have those lands turned over to you. And then you should be, and because the time of the accounting that it's going to be done to do the waste and is going to take you longer than being able to actually get the lands, I'd actually make a special get a special determination done about getting the lands transferred to you immediately, and once the determination of waste is done, then that can be done at a future date. But because you're deforced and you have no place to go or anything else, that you demand to have that property as immediately as possible, and that should be that day. So basically, the sheriff should go and remove those people off it, and you should be staying on that land while the sheriffs are there, going and documenting and accounting everything that's on that property. That's how serious this is. The warranty to this says if they don't do it, it's worse than being murdered over and over again every single day. Because they've stolen everything from you and they're raping you and literally killing you every single day, which it is. Right.
That reminds me of that Tom Cruise movie. You remember when he goes back and lives life every single day, named Hell? I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Could I just ask one more person?
Sure, jump right in.
Level? William, what first motivated you to want to do this? Because everybody has a reason for going down this path. I just wondered what yours was, what really started all this.
Well, I'm going to plug a guy that is an old friend of mine. Kind of wish we were still friends today. Paul Fiola. He was the guy that was a part of all that stuff in Alberta with that land claim and silver and a bunch of issues. It made it worldwide. I was there. I wasn't a part of it. I helped people out there. I met Paul 12 years ago. And as I was saying, I had a corporation, and I also had an ATV rental company where I was renting out ATVs. And I would give tours, free tours to people where I just make a meeting and everybody would show up, and I'd give tours through what was called the Sandylands in Manitoba. It's a massive provincial park, and it's just beautiful. It's full of trails and everything else. And this one meeting, there was probably, I don't know, I think there was 20 or 30 of us, and some of us, we stopped at this because Manitoba has ski trails and stuff. We have winter shelters for skidoos and stuff. And because we're out on ATVs and out in back trails, we came up to one of these, and we all stopped and kind of were having lunch. And I ended up talking to Paul, and Paul brought it up to me about some things about the government and equity and about a set-to-DV trust and things like that, and that everything's de facto. And it was strange at that time because it got me looking. And then for some reason, right after that, I got into a weird situation with the government where they were trying to charge me for a whole bunch of things, for things that I owned and everything else. And it made no sense to me. And I had a lawyer, and they were trying to give me time. And I was like, it didn't make any sense. So I fired the lawyer the day of the trial. They forced me to go through trial myself. I walked out of there with a peace bond for $500 on an assurity that it wasn't an admission of guilt. And I knew it was an admission of guilt. And the judge told me 10 times, swearing that there was no admission of guilt. So I didn't sign it, and nothing ever came out of it. So that was between meeting Paul and then that same thing happening right afterwards. And by them trying to fire me, and because I did just a little bit of law research, that one court hearing where they were going to try to give me time for a ridiculous reason, by me firing my lawyer and them still trying to force the trial on me, the trial didn't even happen. I just stood there on equal grounds and basically challenged the judge that, are we not equals? Right? And that alone back then didn't allow him to proceed on these frivolous charges. It made him basically go to the Crown and force the Crown to agree to, like, this is stupid, right? And if anything, all you're going to be able to get is a peace bond to make sure that the security guard that's whining that he's afraid of a guy that's 5'5", 150 pounds when he was 6'6", 240 was bloody ridiculous, right? And I never even came near the guy. You kind of see what I'm getting at? Like, it was a complete lie. He tried to say that I pinned him against the wall with my truck and all these other things, which never happened, right? And didn't even have to get into trial because the judge already seen that, right? It was just even the security guards all contradicted their stories and everything else. So between the lawyer trying to send me up the river for another client, right, and all these other things that were going on, it just lit it lit a light bulb that from then on, and then I started reading more, and then I actually what really was the biggest turning point was reading Principal and Agent and Contract and Tort. That's where I first found the actual remedy. It's actually in that book, but you have to follow the footnotes. But it took me 10 years to go through them all, because Principal and Agent and Contract and Tort is in the early 1900s, and there's way more law that created that and everything else. So those are just more and more assumptions, but that the turning point was all that stuff, all in just a short little bit of time. So yeah, but that made me pretty much just like enough's enough. So hope that's a good enough story.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, some do say that up until 1910, they wrote the truth, but after 1910, it all changed to basically dumb us down.
Common law died law of property 1925.
Yeah.
Because everybody went into equity. There's no one left in common law to stand in common law anymore. So it's only because when they say that a jurisdiction is dead, it's only because there's nobody in there. When you're talking about common law, it's the trust, it's the foundation to equity. So it's always still there. It can never go away, right? You just have to move yourself out of this one into that one, right? Like you can only be on Mars, right? You can't be on Earth at the same time that you're on Mars. Right?
And there was a chap called David Williams who pursued a path whereby I think it was 21 of his followers and himself got together. I'm just trying to remember what he called his group. David Williams. I've got all his recordings. But the basic idea was they were going to set themselves up under their own jurisdiction and have a treaty, and that held until one of the group broke the rules of the treaty, and then they had to choose whether to evict him from the group or whether the whole group would pay the price. There's just so many different concepts that have been put out there over the years. I mean, the other one is this whole thing surrounding the estate and the executor, and can you take control of your estate? There's been so much done on that. We've even attended seminars on it, 3 and 4 day seminars. Nothing ever conclusive or proven was ever shown. It was all just grand theory. And I think a lot of the time they dream up these ideas and they expect us to be the cannon fodder and go and test their great idea, you know. But whether so many, I mean, we talked on another call about Franco Collins and his manor rolls and creating your seal and all the rest of it. And I see old Kurt Callenbach's now actually offering to do it for a price for you. There's so many people selling the snake oil; it's unbelievable. But
that's exactly what it is, snake oil.
Yeah,
because what people don't understand is Christendom and ecclesiastical law created the corporation in 1285 with the Statute of Mortmain.
That's right.
And all's English, like Maitland goes over this. That professor from Cambridge, that video that posted on Omnipotence there.
Yeah.
Even verifies that English law just didn't make it illegal. You see what I'm getting at? They just didn't make it illegal, because that's all they can do is make something illegal. Can I see what I'm getting at? So,
well, they did try to stop it at one time, right? But then it was already, had enough momentum, and that was it. It was on its own way.
The Statute of Use 1535 abolished all ecclesiastical law and removed it to its own jurisdiction. So all that seals and stuff, and all that stuff that's in the canon law and the ecclesiastical law is now only equity. That's the City of London Corporation, the Lord Spiritual and Temporal, right? The livery companies, right? The Vatican, Washington D.C. right? Those are all. Those are the true controllers of the equity. It's not the governments, right? Because they're the true controllers of the corporations. Livery companies are the corporations. The livery companies are older than English law itself. City of London Corporation is older than English law itself. The City of London, it's been there before English law. And the Lord Spiritual and Temporal and the livery companies have always had possession of those lands. Only possession, because they're in equity. So when people actually realize what that actually means, right? I don't know if I'll get into that in the video right now, because I'd like to be able to vest my lands before picking bones with the elite, but right? Because that's the only way you get attacked is if you start attacking other people, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so it all boils down to corporations within corporations and corporations, and all these. Nobody wants to look at all these different bubbles, which are corporations and all the people within them, right? And when we actually start looking at them for exactly what they are, it becomes really easy, right? So. Any other questions?
Well, there's piles of them, but where to start?
Anywhere you want.
Yeah.
I'll throw one in the mix whilst everybody's thinking. Would you go along with the idea that you do have to be very, very careful not to appear to damage the public because you have certain knowledges and you know you don't want to expose what's happened? You have to be a little bit mindful and a bit careful and a bit diplomatic. Not to share the secret too much, you know, as to how they've created this great conjuring trick. Would you sort of go along with that? I mean, I personally think you do have to be very careful who that you don't make enemies of anybody by appearing to know too much in terms of you know, talking to people who within the public who don't fully understand it.
Yes, and that's why I suggest before people determine where they're going to vest their lands, that they really think about it, because let's face it, when you're in a city around people, their superiors and that judge is nowhere around. So the remedies that you're going to get are not immediate remedies. So when we actually look at this in realistic terms, right? Even currently, when somebody sees that you can do something that they can't, they freak out. So, right? You see where I'm going at with this? So,
yeah.
And because there isn't going to be a police around to restrict their subjects and everything else, it's putting you in a position of conflict. So if we realize that, then we're not going to go and make ourselves stick out like a thumb for those monkeys to come hit you over the head if you just play the duck when you have to, right? You kind of see what I'm getting at? But as for the truth part of it, English law protects itself. For the most part, like the City of London Corporation doesn't have an apprenticeship program for a reason. Most people are going to have to take some time off, kind of like how people write books, to be able to get the basics and absorb what's needed to absorb to get to the understanding. Once somebody's gotten the basic understanding and removed that indoctrination and that equity belief, then that's going to make it so they can best. So between equity and the rules of nature, I honestly believe that it's going to protect itself. Like, if you're going to be somebody who wants to live in equity and screw people over and all that other things, you're going to have a really hard time getting out. And if you do get out and do those things, then nature's going to handle you, right? Just like as we were talking about, right? Because people think, okay, well, right? They want to be ignorant and like, yeah, I'm the donor and you have to fucking listen to me, and right, and that kind of attitude, right? Okay, well, there's gonna be a big guy out there that's gonna fix your fucking wagon one day when you walk into that bar, right? After driving up in your Ferrari with no license plates, right? You kind of see what I'm getting at, and you're your shit around, right? And making all these people feel inferior, right? And right, you see what I'm getting at, and you're gonna think that you're the owner and you can push these people around when you really can't, because you have no right to do that with anybody. Right. So already your actions are already attracting the stuff that's going to fix you, right? You see what I'm getting at? By what
I think you have to be incredibly discreet with all of this and very low profile. I think that's the whole trick of it. You've got to be very low profile.
Until the people around you understand it, and you don't have to worry about them feeling injured, angry, scared.
Well, there's a little add-on, if I may, to that. And my naturally inquiring mind tries to piece things together as best one can. And if you go back to the time of 1066, William basically gave lands to those who were in favour, shall we say. And we know that most of the land here is owned under feudal tenure by various aristocrats. But I still think, believe it or not, there could be private estates that have handed down from generations who've known how to keep it private and to preserve the right of heirship. There was an interesting program the other night about a castle in Yorkshire that's been in the same family for 800 years. And you kind of wonder, well, is it just possible that their status could be different to ours? Do you think that's possible? Do you think there are private estates out there, especially in what we would call the backwater counties, the old counties?
I can pretty much guarantee it. To think that all this law and remedies for this, Maitland's Papers actually has a whole bunch of court scrolls on this, and that's what, from what I've been reading, private acts are for. So once you vest your estate, you now have a private act, and now that becomes an indefeasible estate, so nobody in fee simple can challenge the title, right? So that would mean that Yorkshire estate, if they did that 800 years ago, right, which would make sense, right? If once you actually start looking at the history of the monarchy statutes and what they actually mean for the jurisdictions, that date, if that date is really close to the actual date that was in that article, it makes sense, right? Because that would have been a lord in the ancient land tenure time, when the writ of assize of novel decession was out, and where this really actually started becoming fact of law through court scrolls. Because the very first remedy for English law to get your lands back was the writ of Reversion, and it's in the Statute of Westminster II. It's the very first. The
writ of
Reversion.
Reversion. Statute of Westminster.
And then that was, and because that's in the, this is how I understand the tenures to be going. Because King William usurped the throne in 1066, and because he didn't actually take all the lands till the Doomsday Book 1085, I believe the feudal land tenure started in 1085 or 1086.
Yeah.
And Statute of Mortimer created the corporate jurisdiction in 1285. Statute of Westminster is in 1235, I think it is.
Yeah.
Second. So I believe that the feudal land tenure is from 1086 to 1285. The ancient land, I said feudal land tenure, right?
Yes.
And the ancient land tenure is going to be from that 1285 to 1535. And then the modern land tenure is from 1535 till today.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? So that's how I'm understanding the land tenures and their dates. So everything within, so those are their very own jurisdictions. So the writ of Fermetin could not get carried into the ancient land tenure system. So they wrote the writ of assize of novel decision, and that's a writ of assize is a jury of 12, right? A grand assize is a jury of 24. And there's also a writ of grand assize of novel decision. So in the ancient land tenure system, if the jury and the judge in a claim of reversion did not give the estate back to the donor, the writ of the grand assize had no choice but to grant it to the donor, and all those that were in the jury and the judge of the assize court lost all their estates and the equitable interest, like the value of those estates, all got given to the donor for that injury because they all conspired against the donor to keep them out of his lawful right.
Wow.
That's
Those
why
last couple of sentences are very telling. My
Yes.
goodness me.
And,
That's brilliant.
and because of stare diocese, by the time of the modern land tenure, it changed to the writ of entry decision in the post. There's a picture of it. I'll post it soon. It's also in Blackstone's commentaries in the appendix at the back. I think it's volume 2. And same with the release for the corporate person. It's in there too. If you notice that in the post means in possession. So that's the one that's in possession of your lands wrongfully. And if you notice that decision is always a part of this, right? And that's being deforced, right? So the person that's making the claim is deforced. And that's why it's that's what makes the fee simple individual the decisor, right? And he's right. So it's decision, right? The definitions are all on omnipotence as well. Like if you go into the law blog, the library, or whatever, or even the law blog or the library, there's definitions all down the right hand side.
Yeah.
And they're all in there already. And a lot of them have the screenshots. Like when you read a definition in the law dictionaries, a lot of them will give you a footnote. And they'll say like 2.bl.com.346. Well, that's volume 2 Blackstone commentaries and tells you the page. A bunch of the definitions already have the pictures to those. So when you open up the definition on omnipotence, there'll be a picture and you can just click on it. It'll pop up on the window so you can actually read it right from that book. We'll be doing more of them as we get more, but there's so much information. They were it's taking time. But and so for the modern land tenure, it wrote it into a different way because the stare diocese, like remember now that a writ of entry is not a jury trial, right? So in the ancient land tenure, there was no real law yet to back this up, right? Kind of see what I'm getting at? So the common law judges had to have a court, right, to have these things determined, to write about it, to make it into a law, right, where stare decisis applies. Right? So that's why when we look at the very beginning of law and how it's transcended, right? Those stare decisis are those assumptions, right? So all of a sudden, if you come to a certain spot and now a judge makes an assumption on the opposite way, they follow that, right? But if you can refute that, it goes the other way. You kind of see where I'm going at with that? So all the law that we have today was created from that original grant in 1086 of the land, right? And all the law created since then, because that's the grant, the land tenure, right? That's us granting the lands and our absolute rights and everything else, because we take corporate rights and duties in place to join the group, right? So the stare decisis has been a good thing. And same with this new statute of use jurisdiction, and after Blackstone, it's gotten even better. So, and then we got the law of property, and it gives us even more freedom if we understand that those laws that are written are restricting those within that jurisdiction, and for anybody that's not in those jurisdiction, that's your remedy for them, because it's restricting them. You see what I'm getting at? But when you're a citizen inside it, it's restricting you. Right? So that's made everybody think that this applies to everybody. Well, no, that's not the way that works. You made that agreement, not me. Right? So with municipal law, like Blackstone wrote in the absolute rights of man, right? And that's where, because you got to remember, King William stole the land. Right? Yeah. They didn't want to deal with that, right? So they allowed the churches to start a corporation, right? Well, those churches from 1285 to 1535 were stealing all the lands, all the natural resources, and all the money. It almost broke the monarchy, right? Because they were making Sedekey trusts, right? Where they didn't actually own a property. Right? This, what's his name goes over it in these videos, right? What's his name doesn't own, right? You own the property. But if you give it to 5 people, that's a corporation, they live forever. Right? So I can give it to them and just tell them, like, right? And just hope, right? And hopefully that they're honorable and everything else. And when I die, they're going to give it to this person. Right? And then that person is going to do the exact same thing. Once they get it, they're going to give it back to them. Right? And say, okay, when I die, you give it to this person. That's what the church was doing. They were the ones that created the Sedekey Trust, right? The government, the monarchy, just took it over and made it into a statute of use and rolled everybody into it, right? And that's why they abolished. That's why they abolished Christendom, right? And if you look at the Bill of Rights, 1688, it even specifically states that because of all their criminal in nature and everything else, they're completely barred from anything to do with the trust or the estates or any of the benefit from this system, right? See what I'm getting at? But when people read that, it doesn't make sense, right? Because they don't know that there's 2 systems there, right? That equitable system has always been owned by the Lord Manors and livery companies. That's who put King William into power, right? So the government, the monarchy, has just been allowing these things to just roll over instead of dealing with the original problem that happened by King William. Right? So they just are giving more and more and more freedoms. So now if we actually understand the history and where we are today, they've made this into a temporary system. Mm-hmm. Right? Because they're waiting for us to create, because they can't create it. We have to create it. If they create anything, it's still de facto. It's fake. They can't create it.
You're referring to the fact we're in an Iron Age, and what we need to do is create a Golden Age, yeah?
Exactly. But they can't do it. We can only do it by leaving and creating it ourselves.
That's right. Absolutely. That's my motive.
You know, Phi, the word F, the symbol FE is a symbol for iron.
Yes.
And AU is the symbol for
That's
bull.
right, too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have fee simple or female and all that stuff, and then you have authority and all those AU words, authentication, all AU words.
And isn't that strange that you actually said that about female? Because English law is the only jurisdiction that makes female inferior. Every other jurisdiction, even in nature, the female's the controller.
Yeah. That's
Proper.
true.
It's all mirrored. It's all reversed.
Don't let the wife hear you say that, mine.
Yeah, that's a dangerous one nowadays. Yeah. But
Just out of interest, one of the things when I first got into this I found most fascinating was studying trusts, and I found Albert Weiss was a very good introduction because he kept it nice and simple, because most of his stuff was written on a sort of like almost a magazine article basis. He used to publish articles in magazines, I believe. So they were in nice manageable pieces, if you follow. And what I picked up on early on was there are two kinds of trusts. There's an implied trust and an express trust. So just taking that a bit further, this trust that we're supposedly in as a result of the birthright would be an implied trust, wouldn't it? Because it was never expressed. Would you agree?
no, I can't agree because there's more trust than that.
Right. Well, we appreciate this SSK, and there's also the God, what's the other one called?
That's a contingent trust.
Yeah, trying to think of the other name.
There's
Foreign
a
Citus Trust.
that falls within the contingent. There's three main types of trust. Here, I'll bring it. I'll get it for you right now. What is it? It's vested, contingent, and executive.
Contingent. Yeah, I saw that somewhere in the group. Yeah. Sorry, vested, contingent, and
Executive.
executive. Right. Okay.
I'm trying to find. So I found a really good link on that.
So at the moment, you don't think we can turn around and express the trust, and in so doing, collapse the trust in so much as an implied trust isn't as powerful as an express trust. So if you express the trust, you actually take control of it.
You, to be honest, you don't even really have to
do that. No.
Get. I posted one book. It's Law of Uses of Trust. That's the entire history of the uses and trust for English law. You're going to find that amazing.
All right.
And here's another link about how interests are determined. So you got vested, a contingent, and an executive. A remainder is a future interest that may become possessory by the remainder man, right? But only after all previous interests have expired or terminated, right? So they fall within.
That's where the expression remainder comes from. Oh yeah, okay.
Right.
Sorry, I was thinking out loud. Sorry, was it previous or? You I couldn't write it down quick enough. Remainder was previous.
Oh, you don't have to write it down. I posted the link right in the chat.
Yeah. No, I like to make notes as I go.
Okay.
If I write it, it commits it to memory. My way of learning. Weird, but it works for me.
Okay.
Even if I throw the piece of paper away afterwards, the fact I wrote it down somehow made it important and fixed it.
A remainder is a future interest that may become possessory by the remainder man.
Right.
But only after all previous interests have expired or terminated. A remainder can be either vested or contingent. Okay, so everything that we're talking about is a vested right, not a contingent or an executory. Everything within equity is a is an executory interest that is inside a it's a contingent remainder inside an executory interest. If that makes sense. The
We're
system,
gonna have to go back and type this up. Yeah, it's good. It's really good, William. It's really good. This is brilliant stuff.
but that you don't really have to worry about writing that down. I was just more of trying to give you a visual on how they're putting stuff inside stuff in equity, right? So when we're talking about our vested rights, right? Because
That would be that walking in the park we talked about, William.
What's that?
You got to let these people write down this stuff. You walk through the park. This is how everybody else catches up.
Yeah.
That's right.
So a remainder can either be vested or contingent, and because these are annexed in law, they're a vested remainder or a vested right. Right. A vested remainder is one where the grantee is an ascertainable person, and the remainder is not subject to a condition precedent. Right? So if we're looking at the land tenure, and let's say the land tenure is the agreement, and the corporate person is the acceptance, right? So if the acceptance is being the corporate person, and if we're looking at a condition precedent, right? So that's what's the best way to explain that? Go ahead, Justin. Just say it.
Pre-existing.
Precedent is something that's holding you back, right? So there's a condition there that you have to fulfill before you can do that thing, right? So a vested remainder is only ascertainable in a person. So a person can only get a vested remainder if there's no condition that stops them from doing that. Okay? So when we look at municipal law, by incorporating and being the corporate person, is a disability and removes you from being allowed to be your own. It's a disability in law. I'd almost have to copy it again because it's said really well in the law of agency. But municipal law is the disability. So by being the corporate person, right, is a condition precedent that you have to remove, right? Because all previous interests have to be expired or terminated, right? So because the corporate person is acceptance, right, and your actions is what gives it acceptance, right? And this is the issue that we're seeing when people walk into court, because they're not deforced, but they're claiming that they are. Right?
That's kind of what I was thinking after about an hour ago, but I didn't say it very well. Yeah.
Right? And they're trying to claim something that their actions are saying the complete opposite. Right? Because they're still holding
2 minds.
That's right, because they're still holding those. They're trying to say that they don't work for that company, but they're still driving around in the truck.
Yeah.
So the judge is basically saying, what do you want me to do here? I can't do what you're doing, so I'm just going to throw this out because I can't arrest you for driving around in that truck.
No.
Right? You see what I'm getting at? Because the jig would be up. Right? You kind of see what I'm getting at? So they've already set the law up. So these certain things, right, you have to do something to change the agreement that you made. Right? So because that's the acceptance, and that's the condition precedent to it, to getting your vested remainder, right? Because it's annexed in law, but it's annexed in the common law, not in equity. You don't have any ownership rights in equity. So by you being the corporate person, how can you vest a vested remainder when you don't have one, right? And that's why Blackstone, if you look at, he goes through who has the right of inheritance and who doesn't. There's no one in fee simple that has a right of inheritance.
Correct. I understand that, but
you can pass the fulfillment that's the use of the thing that you're holding in trust for use for a fee. You can leave that to your heir. You can pass that slavery on to your next of kin if you choose. Right? And that's what everybody's been doing by passing that title, right? You know what I mean? And holding on to that thing like it's theirs. Right? No one owns anything.
The interest, the use of
in perpetuity.
Yes, exactly. So that's why that's why we have to make sure that that we get away from needing being attached to the things that you think that you own. You don't own anything till you get out, and then you can start getting attached to them if you want. But even then, I don't think we should ever go back to being attached to things. We need to be attached to people and what's best for them. Because as long as the people around us have everything that they need, we're going to have what we need too.
Yeah, it's not about owning things so much as controlling. As long as you can control.
Yeah, and to control, that means that somebody needs to be in need. So if we make sure everybody around us doesn't need anything, then nobody's going to be in control of anybody, and we're all just going to work together because we want to. We truly want to work together, not because we're forced to, and then I can screw you over behind the closed doors over here, and right? Because that's all that's happening in this system.
Under natural law, and if we go back to our origins, for very survival, we had to work together. I mean, we were all tribal and relatively nomadic as well, but everybody had to work for the common good of the group. Yeah. In order to make it through, and how that's been twisted on us, Now we're set in competition with each other. Right from when we first go to school, it's all about competition. The game of musical chairs is a perfect example. The music stops, they take a chair away. Somebody goes, boom. Another point in interest is, I lost my train of thought then. Carry on, William. It'll come back.
Sorry about that. It's just like we leave the old people and the sick behind. They should be in the right. Like it's just these little things that by changing them, I think would be a completely different outcome on what everything happens on a daily basis. So
I remember what it was now. We had an expression that this is within the corporate person. If you claim you own, then you owe. The two words are synonymous. So, but obviously stepping out of that jurisdiction, absolute ownership puts a different twist on it altogether.
Yeah, I agree. Here, let Justin has some good stuff on this. Justin, take it away for a minute. I'm sure you wanted to say something. Justin from Alberta.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing there.
Go ahead, buddy.
I'm not going to start on a rant. I'm not going to go into the rant.
Come on. You got something to say. I need a minute, so you guys... I
do want to discuss the notice that we're going to, like, this whole control person here, because control person seems like it's a key before we go and make... get the Queen's Bench to do a determination for us.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll just have
proof, right?
Yeah, and as this is where you need to find out the act that's equivalent to the COCD for you guys.
I think we found it. It was at 17 CFR 240. It's called Determination of Beneficial Owner in the States. But I don't know. I'm looking through it and seeing if that's what it is, but it seems to be that's what it is. I think the other Justin actually found it. He put a link on there.
Okay, yeah, that's what was posted. Let me look over that here real quick.
It seems to be voting power and some others. I just highlighted a couple. Control of the issuer is what they really talk about, the control part of it on. I was going to look at it when the call was over. But you're right.
Yeah, it might be it. U.S. has got, you guys got such different ways of writing your regulations and codes.
Oh yeah, this is Code of Federal Regulations. CFR is Code of Federal Regulations. Then we have United States Code. And then we have state codes, of course, and all. Kind of like that's it.
Post the link in the room.
It was already in there. Let me see. I'll back up and get it.
Justin posted it previously.
Yeah.
How far?
Before you guys dive into.
Oh, I got it here. 240.13D.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, David?
Okay, I thought my mic was muted there for a moment, but just in the process of learning what I have learned throughout the ages, and one of them being how to deal with the front end trolls and stuff like that, was a couple things that they've learned through the process of making a claim, or even handing work such as what you guys are looking at to ministers and such. One of the things was, which I already alluded to, was that special private priority. And then they also wrote on the top, and this is in handwriting, wrote on the top, for BC it was special cause, but in the States it used to be, I guess we would say, urgent across the top. Now, when they did that, on each paper that they submitted, they would put it all grouped together with a title page. And that title page gave direction of who you are at that point that you're giving that information, your capacity at that point. And they found that title page sort of zoomed them right in. It didn't, without it, it would get lost, or they wouldn't be looking at it, or they would slum through it, or, they wouldn't do anything really with it. But once the title page was on, the individual that then first looked at it knew exactly who was talking, but additionally, being that it's special private priority, that it was made sure it's a discussion between the two parties that are mentioned in the where you send that paperwork to, or saying putting in the claim. So I'll look into that a little bit more before you guys get into sending your work, but those might be two things to look at first.
Yeah.
Wasn't that for?
I mean, because
you
we're dealing in equity.
You got to remember that government
equity
has the power to delegate all their powers down further to their little secretaries.
Oh yeah.
But wasn't that process that David was talking about? That's for court, right?
No, not. It is for court when they used it most, but it also worked into the advantage when they were sending it to, parties, ministers, and what do you call statesmen and so forth in the States. I forget what the name of the use in the States, but yeah. I was supposed to get all the paperwork that was submitted from Rourke and Eric Von Phelps of all what they put into submitted as claims, and just to go review it. But I haven't received the jump drive yet with all those claims that were filed.
Is he still charging a lot of money for those courses? We reduce it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. I mean, yeah, we're jumping to exclusive equity is what he's advocating. But I'm just saying processes you can take from one aspect, and because you are still dealing in the public for the better part until you're recognized otherwise. Those things seem, over time, seem to have spearheaded their the movement and paperwork anyway.
See, if D makes a trust, whether it's private or public, so whether they're advertising it in the newspaper or it's like an Illuminati type deal, if D's making that trust, it's always going to be in equity.
Right.
So that's where I think people are stumbling on this private and public sector, right? Because in equity there is a private and a public, but it's all public basically because it's all equity. So it's all to protect the landowner. The true private capacity is when you get back to your reversion and you got your territory, you got your land, right? You got your release and you got your confirmation under seal. Then you're truly private, right? Because they're going to have that private act going forward.
Yeah, I think private and public in equity is individual or group.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
But I also noticed that urgent, time sensitive could probably do the exact same thing, because that's what I've been doing.
Okay.
Like when I especially when I hand delivered my last releases before a court, because I wanted to make sure that they got them and actually read them, right, instead of just throwing an envelope on their desk, right? It was urgent, time sensitive, right? So, and it seemed
I'm just going by what the book or what's his name had said to put on your paperwork.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah,
but again, that's it. I mean,
well, having that urgency, time sensitive discretion warning there is also protecting your interaction between men, right? Would you want that? I know I would.
But aren't they all kind of saying the same thing? So you got to remember that as long as we're basically showing like, hey, that's what we're getting at, right? Like no one's what David writes compared to what Justin writes compared to what I write, they're never going to be the exact same thing. So as long as what we're all writing ends up basically saying, hey, this is what we're saying, right? It's still that, right? It can have many forms of it, is what I'm getting at. So it's not saying that any one of them are wrong. They're all probably right as long as they're conveying the same interest on the paper, right? Like it's time sensitive would mean, right? Same thing as urgent, right? Like urgent means time sensitive, right? You kind of see what I'm getting at. That's I'm thinking that's exactly where all this is going, is that they keep manipulating the words and we just take it to too much of an extreme.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Right? Double speak is their tool, not ours.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that the gurus are doing and found out have probably been correct, but only for equity, right? And that's not where I am. That's not where my discussions are, because I already know everything in equity is not mine, right? So that's really the difference. Is they actually think that what is in equity is theirs, right?
I say we call those law gurus going forward merchants. Merchants is a good title for them.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, that's what they are. They're actually working for the library company, believing what they're doing. So,
if D is if D is teaching, then that's basically a merchant. Especially like if we were hosting a conference and we accepted like $150 per seat, there's no difference between us and them.
Yeah.
No, there's a huge difference.
Abraham Lincoln's Empire Killer.
Hold on a second. No, there's a huge difference between that, because they're claiming that they're selling true freedom.
True.
They don't even know what it is. They're selling something, right? We're not selling law. We're not practicing law. We're not giving legal advice. All we're doing is we're showing you, hey, this is what we found. This is the books that we found it in. We're going to sit down. We will spend our time, right, showing you all this and everything else. So the people that want to pay and everything else, they can, and there's nothing wrong with it. People can donate. We can even charge if we wanted to have special things for people and everything else, because those things cost money to hold. Like, the website is not cheap, right? Like, and nobody pays for anything, right? It's, you kind of see what I'm getting at. So there's a time when that has to change, and it's going to end up, we're kind of hoping to set it up so we can get donations soon. But the whole point of it is that it's what you're trying to say that you're selling. If you're going to sell me an apple that's good, then sell me a good apple. Don't tell me that you're selling me a good apple. When I go home, I cut it in half, and it's fucking rotten to the core, right? And that's kind of the issue that we're having here. That these people are claiming that they can give you the trust and all these things, and I can't even claim that I can give you the trust, because I can't give you the trust. You have to give the trust to yourself, right? Yeah. You have to take the time to sit down and learn it. You have to decide how much help you need, and all that I can do is offer my help as much as I can. And if enough people want your help all the time, then they have to realize that we have to eat too. And if there is no donations and nobody that wants to help with money, then we got to go and grow our own food and do our own thing to allow ourselves to eat. So then there's not going to be enough time to help, right? So all these things are all, if people actually use the laws of nature when we're actually thinking about these things, they all work themselves out. If people need, nothing is ever for free, ever, in any jurisdiction, not even in nature, right? In nature, if you needed, right, if there is no grocery stores or anything out there in the springtime, no matter what, I could not give a whole bunch of people my entire time for the entire spring, because that would kill me, right? Not unless everybody was going to be showing up with food every day, and it was guaranteed that I had that till the next year, till I could plant my garden again. You see what I'm getting at? So it's these things that we have to really realize, is that it's, if you're marketing something that's true and that you're doing for you and you're taking the time out of it, you can market it. That's not what jurisdiction is, right? Jurisdiction, the only reason why they can tax you and do those things is because you don't want them to have your land, right? So that money thing and all that other stuff, we have to start realizing that equity is just using money so people don't have to exchange actual things, right? That's what they chose for their instrument of exchange, so it works between everybody, right? That's really what's hurting us in the natural capacity, because now nobody will accept me to go and do work for them for a few hours to make some money, right? So that's what's hurting even us with other people being able to come in and spend time, because so many people have to still pay their mortgage and feed their kids every day and do all these things. So if people need, the people that are doing those things and can't spend that time because they got to do it making money to be able to support themselves, if you want them doing other things with that time, then they have to be able to supplement that there, right? It's just it's a law of nature we're never going to get around, right? So it's kind of just because what people's beliefs are about what the system is, what jurisdiction is, right? And that's also why I gave up the corporation and I stopped working, right? I did all that stuff. We're just injuring ourselves, right? Because if you had $100,000, how long can you camp for if you're only going to spend $600-800 a month? That's like living in luxury.
Yeah.
You kind of see what I'm getting at? So we really have to change our way of thought on that stuff, because there's just no way around it until the people around us will actually accept other things. So, and that's why working together, doing this and being divorced, you're going to notice that to become divorced, if you really need at least one other person to understand this, to help you get through it in an easy manner, right? Because you can't have anything that's an incorporeal hereditament, so that means you can't be insuring a car, you can't be insuring a camper, right? So what you really need to do is have somebody that will hold those assets and let you use them until you vest your estate, right? So a lot of so that's why I was saying the planning and everything else that goes all along with this is really important, right? But yeah, I guess we should get back to that control person, eh?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, if I rattle on, guys, just cut me off, eh? I'm bad for that.
No, it's really good. You keep going. It's brilliant. Hugely beneficial.
The control person is the most important thing for shares or anything within any corporation. If you're not the control person, you can't access it all. You got to go ask the nanny. And it seems like the Canadian Ownership Determination Act, the determining factor is whether or not you have a reversionary right. I guess I should post the link.
Reversionary right.
Which would be your copy of the registration of live birth.
Yeah, exactly.
No, for the corporate person, it's the birth.
Oh yeah, the birth certificate. My bad. That's where you can basically not worry about the corporation, which many people do. They just try to abandon that corporate part of the trust. And they just try to go live on the land and squat on the land.
Exactly, but there's the biggest problem is that you can't abandon a trust. Right? So you can't abandon your citizenship or your corporate person, but you can terminate it.
The trust shan't fail for the want of a trustee.
Pardon me?
The trust shan't fail for the want of a trustee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So we got to transfer that, not abandon it, because it won't abandon. It'll just stay there. And that's why the judges force you to torn, because we tried to abandon it, and well, they never got notice of it. The paperwork didn't go through. It didn't come across his desk, so now there's no paperwork, and now there's no proof. There's no fact of law.
Oh.
So we're creating
a turn back to the group, to
That's
the corporation.
The de facto system isn't going to do de facto law.
Exactly. Yeah, no shit. Hey. That's a good one. You gotta put that one in a quote. Because that's so true. I just posted the Canadian ownership rate and trusts, the interpretation on what discretionary interest is and interest in expectancy, because the very next section is the determining beneficial ownership classes of trust. So in trust law, if you're not the beneficial owner, you have no right to the trust. So this is the second part, determining the beneficial owner. And we'll notice that it's interests in expectancy and interests in possession. So the determining factor is the interest in expectancy, because it is the vested. If we go back to that other page about future interest reversions and possessions, right? Between vested and contingent and executive remainders, we know that a vested remainder is something that's in the future. It's in futurio, right?
This is where we don't need to know the actual amount. We just need to know it's 12.3%, right?
Well, you got to remember that even the accounting, you're not going to do it. That's the judge's job to do it through the Trustees Act. Because if we look at the Trustee Act, it says that the judge is the one that makes sure that the passing of the accounts is correct, because only a judge can terminate a trust or change who the owner would change, move a trustee and give it back to the true owner, or transfer the trustee to another. Only a court can do that. The government can't do that. So this is them just giving you control of it. So now what you do is take the bench, and then they can pass the account. So as soon as you get control of it, you can set off against it. Once you've taken it to the Queen's bench to get it removed and pass the account, you get the entire estate.
Right. So you can take back the estate. So you were very broken there. I don't know how it was for everybody else. There was a lot of interference on the last couple of minutes you were talking, a lot of buzzing, and it broke up quite a bit. Does anybody else have that problem?
You're actually doing it too.
Yeah.
You guys are coming in pretty clear for me.
All right.
I see X's mic is on, and
I see going into the capacity of the control person the only way out of this, because if we're not in the control person capacity, it's basically proving that we're incompetent still. We're not administering or executing anything still.
Children who can't hold the nappy up. Yeah.
Well, don't forget that by not being the control person, they've assumed, because here's the presumptions.
Right, that's democracy. Consent to be governed.
Yeah, that it's this. Here's the. I'm posting the assumption now, and I'll read it real quick. The presumptions for this purpose of determining whether a partnership or trust is a non-eligible person, the partnership or trust shall be deemed to be a corporation incorporated in Canada or elsewhere, and respect to a partnership, the interest and rights in respect of its capital or income shall be deemed to be shares of the corporation. The beneficial owner of those interests or rights shall be deemed to be shareholders. So you're not the control person or anything else. You're just a shareholder now, right?
Right.
Now, when we go with respect to the trust, right, the beneficial interest in the property, right? Now we're talking about the actual shares, right? The trust shall be deemed to be shares of the corporation. Right? So now they took your shares and wrapped them into the corporation as well. Right? Then the owners of those beneficial interests shall be deemed to be shareholders of the corporation, and the trustees shall be deemed to be the members of the board or directors of the corporation. So they're talking about, because this is Canada, right? They rolled all those shares into the Canada Corporation, right? Now the owners are now the beneficial interest, right? Which is the interest in expectancy, right? And now they're deemed to be just shareholders because they're not the control person, right? And then the corporation trustees, which is the people acting as function of government, are the members of the board of directors of the corporation. Right? So we can see that just this assumption here takes all your rights away from that. Right? So all you have to do is refute those with those other sections that we talked about earlier. Right? Because if we look at this, the determining about an eligible person and the controller, right? The acquisition of control of the corporation by another corporation is whereby it establishes that there is in effect an agreement or an arrangement enforceable according to the terms under which the satisfaction of the condition or the happening of that event that is reasonable to expect will be satisfied or will happen. The corporation will, two things, cease to be controlled by the controller. Oh, sorry, I should have posted that. Yeah, thanks, Justin. Shall cease to be controlled by the controller and become controlled by a person or group of persons who may, with whom or which each of the members of which, as the case may be, the controller is dealing at arm's length. So if we break that down, and start off from the very beginning, if there is an agreement or arrangement enforceable according to the terms, well, that's our birth certificate. It's the indenture to the corporate shares, right? So that's the enforceable interest, right? And then the next thing is, under which upon the satisfaction of a condition or happening of an event, right, that is reasonable to expect that it will be satisfied or happen or will happen, right? So that's the expectancy again, right? Because we're talking about a vested interest where you have to do something first before it's going to happen, right?
That's why they're calling the birth certificate an event.
Oh, what?
An event?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Right? That's the event. You got to remit it, right? So once they are sure that satisfaction of that condition is going to actually happen, right? The corporation will cease to be controlled by the controller. So now the government loses control of the control status.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now can be controlled by a person or group, right? They add in a group so they can change it, right? So when one of the...
Yeah, so if you slip up, OPCA litigation kicks in, they can escheat it back.
That's right. And it's also so they can transfer it from one minister to the next when one retires or whatever, right? It can go to the next person. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I just need clarification on something. I was on mute when I was trying to speak about. When Justin, you just said that the birth certificate is the proof of the event, yet, if I understand it, wasn't the registration of live birth the proof of the event, and then the birth certificate is the extract of that event, or is that something you think it differently?
No, because we're talking about not the land, we're talking about the corporate shares of the corporation.
There's two different events.
Okay.
And they're both completely separate from each other.
One can't see the other, but that's why you want to get into that control person position, because then I'm quite sure the justice from the Queen's Bench is going to look at you quite different.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can see both.
Right. Both of those capacities, the guy that's in the judge position and the control person can see the different jurisdictions. It's like a suit. You can put it on and leave or enter. You're doing something that's way beyond the one jurisdiction. You can remain the control person and live comfortably, but that's dependent on if all the system works, right? Where we want to close this system and invest everything back into our actual possession.
Yeah.
And just so you're real, I'm going to post this about what is what they consider as a non-eligible person, and it's anybody that's not a part of that corporation, which makes sense. You have to have shares in that corporation to be an eligible person, right? So
it's funny because when I tried traveling, I didn't have Alberta ID cards. I had my natural resource photo ID. So me and the airport started discussing this, and we tried to figure out how to enter that card into it. And we actually stumbled across discussion talking about residence and domicile. But at the time, she had no idea, and even me, I wasn't really sure what she was talking about. But now looking back at it, the airports have a system, because that's what I stumbled upon. I just didn't know what it was, and neither did she. She's trying to enter my class of person, basically, into a wrong jurisdiction. That's why it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I've gone to the airport with a lot of different types of IDs. Some my own, made my own, and private pilot IDs. They won't accept that. Passport. They have lots of different stuff, but they always let me go through with my own private ID. The other ones they
not
wouldn't.
to go off topic, but I was just thinking
I'm
on
not
that.
going. They wouldn't let me go through with a pilot's license or whatever. It has to have some kind of picture on it, which I had a picture.
Yeah, I don't know if I tried to start doing it again. That's a 3 years ago now that I traveled last time.
They don't stop the real live man.
Well, now that they have the Freemen on the land, terrorists, whatever they want to call it, it's not really even legislation. It's just a group of, I don't even know if it's government. It can't be government. But they just made their opinion on it, so it's not even.
I think you'll find that it's basically the judges have taken it upon themselves. That apparently there's quite a sort of jungle drum system working, whereby the judges have a hot email system where they're all updating each other on anything clever that comes their way, and they basically they do it on the basis that they have a kind of divine right, because it's in the benefit of protecting the system. In the same way that there's certain things they can't allow to go before the court, like if you challenge a mortgage, because if you perchance you were successful, it'd bring the whole system down, wouldn't it? So they're really protecting the system, and the judges take it upon themselves to do that. And that's why the sort of free-man terrorist thing came into existence. And we talked about that Canadian court case last week, didn't we?
But that's the legislation that allows them to do it. I'll show the link here. This is the new. This isn't legislation. This is something that's like it's a private thing, but the judges are using it to form opinions to elaborate on what the OPCA litigation is now. So basically, if you fail at anything, jurisdictions, you're a terrorist.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Well, then, can you incriminate yourself in law?
Well, if you're punching yourself in the face, I wouldn't want you around me either, or my children. No. So
exactly. You have to demonstrate competency, and you have to demonstrate you can be trusted as well.
No,
they don't want you causing mayhem, do they?
Before we get too far away from this, I just wanted to discuss who the qualified applicants are.
Oh, yeah.
Why it would be the one that's in expectancy, in reversion and remainder. I posted it in the room. Basically, it's who may apply. The following are qualified to apply for a certificate. Right? Any person prescribed. I'm not going to read them all. I'm just going to read the punchline, and that's number F, letter F. Any person prescribed as being qualified to apply for a certificate, or, now here's that or again, who falls into a class of persons prescribed as being qualified to apply for a certificate. So, we already know that you have the right by the beneficial interest that is in this chapter. Interpretation. Beneficiary includes a person in whose favor or whose benefit a discretionary power may be exercised. And it gives a list of a bunch of different things, and I'm just going to go to the one of most interest. And that's the interest in the it actually didn't post very nice, did it? Oh, posted it. This is the piece of importance, because that's what posted there is supposed to be in 5 different pieces, but it all went into one paragraph for some reason. It's an interest in expectancy. Means an estate or interest in remainder or reversion and any other future interest, whether vested or contingent, right? But does not include a discretionary interest.
Yeah.
Right? So you can see that right off the hop, you already have the vested right for the ownership rate of trust, right? Because that's the interpretation, right, on who the beneficiary includes, right? So all the things within this are all what they consider to be beneficiaries. So doesn't it, that means that you are, because you're a beneficiary, right, that would, you fall into a class of persons prescribed as being qualified to apply for a certificate, right? And that I'd like to point out that this act is for making an application to determine whether or not you're an eligible person to take control of the ownership rate, right, as the control person, right? So you have to prove that first thing that you have to state is that you want a determination, a written determination, under this act, under this section, right, in regards to being the eligible person, right, to an eligible person with a vested interest that is not in control, that wants control, right? See what I'm getting at? So that's not really wording it exactly properly, but that's basically the gist of what you're writing. And then you got to deal with the presumptions, right? Because the first thing that you're going to write, that you're going to assume is that I accept that you write that I'm a part of the corporation and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not, because I'm vesting my entire reversion and all the estates and interests that are attached to that process, right? So that's showing you that's proving to him and getting rid of that presumption so that they know for a fact that this future interest is actually going to happen, right? So by dealing with just, that's pretty, and from my understanding, that's all we have to deal with. That one little bit right there. Because once you've asked for the determination for those things and you prove that you are vesting the estate and that thing is going to happen, and that you no longer are going to be a part of that that you're no longer a part of that corporation, and so on and so forth, that they are bound by this act, right, to give you a certificate to take to the courts to have a passing of the accounts.
So that's what happened, was that you satisfied the minister his opinion, and that's why he passed you to Tyler.
That's right. But then Tyler didn't do it. He tried to play a game.
Or didn't know.
Or didn't know, yeah. But honestly,
because if he's still on sick leave, that means he probably didn't know, and they're just putting him on sick leave, so he's paid vacation until his, clears.
I think they just moved him to a different area.
It's very possible.
They write a bond, I think, and they do it for 3 years before it clears or something like that. And they screw up.
But once again, that's all internal accounting. There's nothing we can do or anything else. It really is a moot matter.
No, it's just neat to see how close you were.
Yeah,
you really stepped right there.
Yeah, I was like right there, yeah. So we just have to figure out the best way to write this so it's as short and as blunt as possible, so they can't say, "Oh, what are you saying?" Right?
Yeah. Remove the wriggle room.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's basically just seeking the determination of the control person.
The eligibility and the control person.
Right, yeah, because you got to be eligible.
That's right. So by proving that you were or are a Canadian citizen, because you still are, because you haven't gotten your release, but you've released it, so you can even say that. You can say that, right? Because the government has not given me my confirmation of release yet, right? Which is required, because as soon as they've received it, I am released, because they don't have a choice, right? So right there, that makes it so that thing has happened. Because you got to remember, this has nothing to do with the land tenure. They know nothing about the land tenure in incorporeal hereditament. They can't see or recognize.
They couldn't. Yeah.
Right, but you can tell them about it, so there can be no denying that you're taking this all the way. Right, but just don't get into it too much, because it's kind of moot. Right, it can give you just that little bit more that you need, but I wouldn't get into the land tenure and that stuff, because now you're getting the things that they can't deal with. Right, and then they're going to play the confused idiot on you.
Yeah, right? Very much so. They're very well rehearsed at that.
Well, are they ever? Yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, becoming a control person is just really the means to becoming in the capacity to fund this exit.
You've got to become divorced.
So if you were to take the steps from day one, let's say that you were still a court person. Could you run me through that one step, the next step, that kind of thing? Just an overview where you would go.
Kate, if I was a corporate person, once I have all my affidavits and stuff pretty much ready, right? So I have all the actual facts that I need and everything all together, and my paperwork all together, my understanding. Then I would start liquidating all my assets. If I had a lot of assets, I would take this Canadian Ownership Determination Act and take it to an accountant and get them to determine where my equitable assets are best to be put for the most equitable profit for what this act says. I don't have any assets, so I don't give a shit. Then
nor do I, so I don't give a shit.
And then I would
just hold the phone on that one. So, what's the difference between being dispossessed of your assets or you disposing of them? Is there any difference? Well, can we dispose of our own assets?
Yes, but what I'm getting at is like your RRSPs, because there's an actual accounting formula for when you leave. It seems like some things quadruple in their value.
Yeah,
right?
That would make sense.
So if you had assets and you could put them all into and make them all quadruple, right, instead of liquidating them yourself in private, right? You kind of see where I'm going at with that. So, as long as you leave enough funds for yourself in actual cash to be able to self-sustain yourself for a maximum of 2 years, right? That's worst case scenario, because I think a baby, if they took 2 years, they could not only learn the English language, but they could learn this too. All right, you know what I mean? Like somebody from China could come here and learn the actual language they need to learn, and learn this if they just dealt with just the determining factors of it, not going down the rabbit hole.
Okay.
I would liquidate all my assets to make sure that I would try to find somebody else that the things that I really wanted to keep. Let's say I had an old collector car that was in the family for generations. I would sell that to a friend for $1. And anything else that I wanted to keep, I would get him to store it that weren't an incorporeal hereditament, just so it could stay out of our harm's reach and everything while you're vesting.
Yeah.
After then I would basically because I don't have anybody that I can go and stay on land and stuff with, so I chose to get a camper because I already had a truck and just a camp. So, and I have somebody that will insure that stuff for me and let me use that stuff. So that's right. So either you can stay with a friend, or you can get somebody to do the same thing that I did, or even rent you a place, right? That type of thing, and you stay there, that type of thing, and then basically start to vest you, and then start your actual vesting process. And that would be the first thing that you would do would be once you've liquidated your assets, because you're not holding anything now. Now you can release your corporate person, and that's when you would hand deliver your releases to the Attorney General and the Lieutenant Governor of your province or state, the one that holds the seal, and their attorney for that jurisdiction, and make sure they're hand delivered, and then start with your discussions with them, and see if they're even gonna move on a confirmation of release, and see if they're willing to escheat the lands from the individual in fee simple, since they got those lands from them and they've got a title from them, and they have the authority to escheat things back for the true lord, not the fake one. And if they don't do that within your prescribed time, I generally use the same time frames as jurisdiction uses for their courts, right? For a reply. And if they don't, then I would give notice to the tenant and give them the same amount of days to reply and actually grant the wish and make the court date to transfer the property. Because even the fee simple, none of them have the right to transfer the property. Everybody will have to make the one that's in holding the thing in trust is supposed to make the court date to transfer it to the true owner. So that's why when you get the control person, you would make the court thing. But anyway, continuing on, and then if the tenants didn't do that, then I would go down to the courthouse. I would file my writ of entry claim based on the lands, and then I would go and stake my claim on those lands as stated in common law, because we are doing common law. We are not doing equity. We have to follow the rules of both common law and equity. So you will have to not only stake a claim on the lands, you'll also have to submit the claim the way the court requires you to in equity. Because the equity, until you get your deed of release, the court's going to assume you're in equity. So if you don't follow the equitable procedures until those are removed, they're going to toss your claim. Because you got to remember, and also the law applies to those in that jurisdiction. So the fee simple, if you're giving them common law stuff, that's not their jurisdiction, and it does not apply to them, right? So you're doing the things for the common law warranty, so you are following your warranty for the jurisdiction that you're in, and you're restricting the people with the laws of their jurisdiction that they're in, because remember, like, law is law. I can't bring somebody from another jurisdiction. So, and then that starts the process, and then you're going to be in court from then on out.
The only thing you left out of that seemed like was that you had to have a claim of land so that they could actually do it.
No, I said that you gotta send the tenants notice, and when they fail, right? Because they have
to. Description.
They're the ones that's once you give the tenant of the lands notice, they're supposed to say, yes, I recognize you as the donor, because I recognize myself in fee simple, right? And I will make the claim to the proper jurisdiction to have the lands transferred to you.
Right.
Because they can't give it up. And if they don't within that prescribed, if they don't reply to you within that 15 days or whatever that your jurisdiction gives for replies, right? Then you go and you make your claim. And then, right? And that's where I got into having to make the equitable claim the way that they require it, plus also going and staking the claim on the land within the laws of common law and the laws of reversion. And that's so anybody else that thinks that they have an interest in it, right, is going to make a claim. So that's also why, another reason why I don't think it would be a very good idea to make a 40-page claim to go stick on boards everywhere, because you're going to make everybody think they have an interest in it. Right? And then you're going to be fending off all these fee simple that are thinking you're taking their crown lands or something when they have an interest to it too. Right? That's the last thing you want. Right? Is a flurry of motions from 1,500 different people. Right? Because then you're going to need a lot of money. Right? Because every process that it takes before you can stop them and invest your estate is going to cost you a fortune. Right? Because they want $250 for the claim, and I think it's $250 for every motion, and then you got to send everything by registered mail, right? You see what I'm getting at? And then if you do when I challenged the live record of birth, the thing was 60 pages, man. I sent that to the Queen and everything else. That alone, just sending and printing and doing that for all the different parties, and the actual claim itself, I think it was almost $1,000 just to start the claim, or just over. Yeah, I think it was $1,200 because it was $300 to send everything by registered mail because everything was so big. I sent it to the Queen and everything. Right, so the Queen knows I'm vesting my estate. I've taken this as high as it can go. And I don't suggest anybody sending anything to the Queen till the judges fail to do their duty. And I'm sure if the judges fail to do their duty and I send it to the Queen, it will be dealt with. I'm almost positive of it, because everything in law states that. And these judges aren't going to mess with it, because if that happens, then that judge is going to lose everything they have, everything. They're going to lose all their estate, all their equity, everything.
I don't know if I'm correct about this. It's just something that intuition has kind of pointed me towards, and that is you don't write to the Queen directly, you write to her private secretary. And the reason being is it shows respect that you know the protocol. So if you write to the private secretary will then place it before the Queen for her consideration. If you follow.
That's equity. I'm the Queen's boss.
Okay.
The Queen doesn't own anything.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that determines if you're her slave or whether you're her boss.
Yeah, be polite.
Fair enough.
Be polite and everything else. Thank her and all her ancestors for putting up with such a shitty trust agreement and everything else, right? Because no, seriously, when people actually understand the true line in the sand, and that it's only because of the monarchy that you have this, that we all have this, right? Because the church and all these corporations and the library companies have been trying to steal it since 1285.
Absolutely, I got the bit about the church, yeah.
Right, so there's if it was not for the monarchy and her picking these certain judges, right? Not the Queen herself, but in specific times, we've had some good monarchies. I wouldn't say good monarchies; they're all terrible, but they still appointed good people here and there that were able to make laws in English law that are giving us the freedom that we have today, that we always had. But we have to remember that it's always about law, and law binds everybody in that jurisdiction. So if that jurisdiction does not believe in freedom, will you ever have freedom inside it?
No.
You kind of see where I'm getting at. So if these few judges didn't do what they did, we wouldn't have this law, this good law, inside such a bad law to make sure that they can't do it to us if we choose not to let it happen. You kind of see what I'm getting at? So all English law is shit. It's slave law. It's a scam. But the only reason why you can't be violent and everything else is because they've actually wrote the remedy in the law. So there is no need for any violence or anything else. And if you plan it properly, your vesting time, it's gonna be a vacation for you.
So, out of interest, a couple of comments on that. What about the people in America? Do they understand that they're part of a British colony?
No, they have no freaking clue at all.
No, because in 1776, the Illuminati, which would be their usurpers of the function of government, declared independence.
Exactly, and they believed it.
Yeah.
Illuminati formed in April, and then in July you have the United States of America.
China and Russia don't even know that they're part of fee simple. It's the entire planet. The entire planet. Anywhere where there's where they're using the English common law, right? And I mean the common law. So.
What about France?
France, for sure. All of them.
Well, France is a republic, so yeah, but you need a You're saying that you would write to the monarch. Who would be the monarch of France or America? I mean, I understand that if there's no Senate sitting in America, the president becomes a king. I've heard that said.
I got to remember that those are all equitable jurisdictions now.
Yes.
There's only one common law jurisdiction, and it all belongs. And the monarchy of the Crown Corporation holds trust to all lands for everyone within the common law jurisdiction. So everyone.
You just said about Russia, for instance. I mean, it's fee simple, but it's not controlled by our monarch, is it? Although Nicholas was a cousin of the royal family, Tsar Nicholas was a cousin, but of course that, then they had the revolution, didn't they?
Yeah, but that's my point about the law. If a territory truly believes that there's no such thing as freedom, is there going to be? Like let's look at the world wars. When that happened,
look at dictators. Dictators usurp it and won't allow it.
But let's just take this to a whole nother level, because you got to remember all this stuff that everybody's talking about right now is way after 1535. So. Right, so all these things that are happening are way after 1535, or even after, let's say, 1066, because there's Russia wasn't Russia in 1066, right?
No.
Right, and there wouldn't have been a lot of people in Russia at that time because it was almost Antarctica. So
yeah, exactly.
Right,
it was all out under ice.
All these countries that have the Caucasian breed,
yes,
land masses are all from the English colonies. That's why the white man is like the worst thing that has ever happened.
Probably, yeah. But it is said that, of course, that originally this was uninhabitable because of the ice cap, and it was only when the ice receded north that people migrated up from Egypt. And if you follow the now DNA that they're doing, you'll find that the majority of the population here are descended from people who migrated up from Spain, the Mediterranean, and Egypt. So they reckon.
And all law is derived from the time of Egypt.
Now we're getting there.
The ancient pyramids. So if we look back to that far, what part of the world is not going to be part of the common law, the main law of the planet? Everybody does equity. There is not a country on this planet that does not deal with equity within the system, within the United Nations.
Right.
Right, and they all have municipal law. Right, every one of them has municipal law jurisdictions. Right, so that's telling you right there that they're all bound by the same individual created those laws. Right, they just got the authority to make a new sphere, right, like a new pie inside there, and control that pie and everybody inside that pie.
Yeah,
right?
got it.
That's that bubble thing again, right? So that's kind of where all that really falls into.
You can understand to a degree what you're saying there if you follow the several acts that were done around in the Victorian era. The most important one of which was the I can't remember, 1845, I think it was, and it was the Consolidation and Corporations Act. And very interestingly, a lot of the corporations at the time, namely railroads, canal companies, shipping, so on and so forth, were needing the law to assist them, right? Whether it be in the purchase of lands or stopping trespasses or whatever. And they went to the government. They said, we can't keep coming back to you, government, every time we want a law. Will you give us the authority to write our own laws in our own jurisdiction? And hence, bylaws came into existence. And that, how you get local councils, how you get the railways putting up signs saying trespass on the railway, and so it goes on. So there was a kind of delegated authority as a result of that act that sub-corporations of the parent corporation, i.e. the railroads and the councils, could write their own bylaws. Interesting, isn't it? So there's a parallel there from what you were just saying, I think.
Yeah, we actually, what's that, the original Municipal Corporations Act written by the Queen, or the monarchy? It's on Omnipotence, we have it.
Yeah.
Give me a second, I'll grab it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the easiest way to really do this is start a chronological folder in your mind of years and what laws are in those years, and just remember that that law only starts at that time, and it can't be any time before that, and that law that was just created was derived from another law before that.
But certain laws could never be repealed, am I right?
Exactly. And that's common law. They can't repeal common law.
Yeah.
They can only repeal equity, right? They can never change the constitution of the monarchy, right? So any of the Statute of Westminsters, they can't change. Even though they do change them in equity, but they don't have any right to. But nobody does anything about it. Right?
Well,
like
it comes back to your consenting to it, doesn't it?
Well, that's just it. Just like the BNA Act, right? None of the countries are allowed to change it. But, geez, what happened to the Constitution rights that all these countries gotten? So in 1985, now all these corporations have their own constitutions, right? See what I'm getting at? But the common law constitution is the Magna Carta.
Yes, of course it is.
You kind of see what I'm getting.
The barons.
So, that's right. So you can see that the constitutions only come when they're on land, and you'll notice that it took that long to move the corporate jurisdictions onto the land through the Law of Property Act 1925, right? So it wasn't until actually 1925 that they had enough municipal corporations all over the land.
That noise again.
And once they had enough corporations on the land, now they could make
This
land.
is not a test.
No shit. They found me.
Just out of interest, we actually used to go along to Runnymede and sit as close as we could to the exact spot where the Magna Carta was signed, and used to have a day-long picnic discussing all this, the common law. Although back in the day, we were a little bit naive compared with the level you're at now. But, you know, we all have to start down the path somewhere. But some of the information that was shared even back then was really good, you know. But yeah, to think that we actually sat at Runnymede, it was brilliant. Lovely sight on the side of the Thames.
Oh well, just wait. I thought like the guys, the stuff that they've been finding is they basically the guys have pretty much found the history of the birth certificate and the live record of birth, and like it's just getting to like it's basically getting all the little nitty gritty, like because we basically have the bulk of it all, right, for the entire history. But now that more people are getting into it, there's just so much out there that they did wrong. It just blows your mind how the things that are written out there that we've all just overlooked, and our ancestors as well, you know.
Yeah.
So
right. In many ways, it's a shame this has to be so complex, because on the face of it, if you read the Sestake, you read Remitter, it should be a fairly simple process. And the fact that you have to be so knowing and knife right about every part of the process, the wording, the understanding, and everything else, you know, I appreciate that, you know, it is a baptism of fire to do this. But in some ways, it's a little annoying that it couldn't be more simple. That, you know, you have to commit. You have to be so committed in terms of wanting to do this and being prepared to suffer to do it, you know, because without a question, there's going to be some discomfort, isn't there? And in a way, that's kind of wrong.
But that's kind of the catch in nature. Once you get so far off the path, it's just going to get harder and harder to get back.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you're not willing to put in that effort to get back, then you're not willing to fix what you did wrong, right? So you don't go back, right? Like,
no, I agree.
It's just the rule of nature, right? If we're not willing to fix the things that we messed up, right? And that's all we did. We messed up, right? So now we just have to learn from that, right? And it's
you kind of wonder amongst the population, and more so those in control of the system, given that most functions of government now are compartmentalized and work on a need-to-know basis. You kind of wonder who actually has a global view of all of this. Even the Queen, what education does she actually have in it? And I wonder I often try to imagine, you know, people at the top of the tree, how their education was different to ours, and how this was all explained to them. It must be amazing, mustn't it? Because they would have to know how all this has been structured, wouldn't they?
Honestly, I think it all just happened out of mistake and laziness and not wanting to fix the past, and we'll just keep going forward and we'll just overlook it, right? And it's
usually the one that's holding the map and loses it doesn't tell the group until it's too late.
That's very well put.
Exactly. Yeah. You kind of know what I mean? And that's kind of where we're at. And there's no sense continuing to keep pointing fingers and smacking each other and everything else when that's just taking away from us. Right?
You got to go to peace with the system without a doubt. There's no,
So
Yeah.
I think it just happened all by just history. Like, don't
So
forget.
you're saying it's all just floating out there in history, and we might be the only people who are really piecing it all together. That nobody has a global view of how this all works, however high up the tree you go. Even the Queen herself may not have as much comprehension of it as you do.
The
None of them do.
Brainless.
Yeah.
You got to remember that if even B knew what was going on, this whole thing would collapse. She's born into a system that she just fills, right? This is what you do. She does it.
That's right. It's just a theatrical role.
I believe the City of London. No, I honestly believe that Freemasons thing is the only reason why these corporations got to where they got to. Who exactly our saviors are, I have no idea.
Wow.
I don't know if it's just people like us that it's just the same thing. It's the laws of nature. The more shitty people out there that are trying to screw us, the more of us will be on this side doing what we're doing right now.
It's a mixture of really benevolence failing to be benevolent and more falling down and becoming arrogant of their job, right? If you look at the Knights Templar, that's basically what they were doing, is being a security system to the land trust system, right? But now we expand that to the United States. The United States has taken that basically capacity over.
So do you guys do you remember this idea about the Holy Trinity, the Holy See, the City of London, and Washington D.C. each being their own square mile, and they work in a triangulation, in so much as the Holy See in Rome is the faith.
Well, it's kind of like asking this: does Walmart have security?
Of course it does.
Okay.
So yeah.
So then
But
you answer the
I was
question.
just coming to the point of saying, if London, the City of London, is law and banking and finance, then Washington D.C. is the enforcer. In other words, that's now become head office, the enforcement and the control. Would that be right? I'm just seeing if we're somewhere on the same page here.
Yeah, and the Vatican is the original ecclesiastical jurisdiction that was created in 1285.
Right, because there was a divine intervention.
Yeah,
The
and it's
divine
still,
appeared to the Holy See and said, I make you trustee of this whole planet.
and you will notice that the Vatican and the City of London Corporation do not intermix themselves.
No.
You'll notice that each one of these, even this Washington D.C., each one of these jurisdictions,
They work in autonomy. Yeah.
that's right. They work on their own, and it is the Bilderbergs that control them.
Yes, of course.
So, but that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. That the livery companies of the City of London Corporation have been the reason why this has always been.
Yeah.
That is the Lord spiritual and temporal, and because it's been the livery companies that have always had control, they've just used the faith as a scam. So they
of course,
know, right? They know that
1302, the Unum Sanctum.
Yeah, 13.
They usurped that.
Yeah,
just a
exactly.
control mechanism.
That's right. But you'll notice that that's after 1285, the Statute of Mormon.
So does anybody know why the unicorn on that crest has got a chain?
I don't know. It's all esoteric.
Yeah. But it does have
Got to know what
relevance.
the unicorn is in scripture to know why that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's scripture or if it's actually ancient Egyptian, because if you notice, esoteric is exactly the way Egypt is, and that's why they are esoteric, and that's why that's still the fictional jurisdiction.
Well, the unicorn's Ephraim.
What's that?
The unicorn represents Ephraim.
What's that?
One of the tribes of Israel, or the equivalent of Taurus in constellations.
Yeah.
See, and I was gonna say from my studies, the unicorn is simply the bison that we went and slaughtered here in North America. It's gone.
Remember, this crest also incorporates the New Jerusalem.
Huh.
So, yeah, there's a bit more to it. I was hoping Lawrence would come in at this point, because this is kind of area he's quite knowledgeable about.
Well, this is why you're going to talk about Taurus, because you're going to have to go and look at who the 12 gods were that the father Abraham was worshipping, and the other ones when they started falling. Right, they started falling and looking at the astrological signs, worshipping them. So you can take the Vedic, the whole theory of the Vedics, and apply that and see what's going on. And they're simply just worshipping energy. The golden calf.
There was the 12. It was the 12 tribes of Israel, wasn't it?
Yeah, constellations.
Yeah, and those 12, and there are now the 12 houses, I believe.
If you read the book of Yasher, it explicitly explains it right in there. This is why Abraham, when he went in to his father's home, he ended up leaving that giant statue alone with the, I think it was a knife or a club, and he destroyed the other 12 ones and accused the giant statue of coming alive and killing off the other gods.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is just astrology right now today.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember some of the names of the 12 houses. We did start making a list once, and I've got them written down, but it's kind of late at night here, and the brain's not working quite as well as it should. But I remember that one of them we couldn't find. We knew the name of it, but we couldn't actually find any reference to it. And throughout history, if it's seemed appropriate, they do tend to lose things, including the Geneva Convention, 1930. That's absolutely been hidden. You cannot get it. No way. Because if you did, you would then have all the evidence you ever needed. So some things, as I say, throughout history, they've deemed it prudent, and probably in our best interest as well as theirs, to, for it to disappear. Have you come up with anything else, Lawrence?
In what respect?
Anything to contribute? Because you're quite big into the history of this.
Well, you can go off on different tangents, so that's why I don't want to get too far away. But I mean, Ephraim interested me because my birth sign happens to be Taurus. So it's also meant to represent America, the new land, and that's all I can think of at the top of my head, as you say, at this time of night when I've been smoking and I'm tired.
Yeah. Lawrence is very recreational.
We all are.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Brilliant call tonight. Absolutely. This is drinking from a fire hose again. But it's nice to be able to pull all this back into proper context now, because I was, problem is we come by so many bits of information and it's hard to figure it all together, So tonight's been extremely helpful. It's put a lot of clarity of.
How about Wednesday? We kind of we'll kind of toss around this Canadian Ownership Act thing again, and just to touch up on it, and then
presumably whatever acts you discuss is going to be an equivalent somewhere, isn't there, for every jurisdiction?
Exactly. Yep. And then I was thinking that we should go into the corporeal and incorporeal hereditaments.
Yes, that would be good. Yeah, an understanding of those is essential.
Hey, what is?
An understanding of those would be essential.
On that Canadian Act, were you reading off the first 5 pages? 'Cause I lost you at some point. I didn't have a microphone. I can tell where you were.
I was kind of reading off a PDF, and then that one act that I posted in the room. I thought everybody had the PDF.
I was looking at it in the room on Omni, and it only had 1 page, so I didn't. Once you went to another page, I think I lost it.
No, there's a download. There's a PDF, and you can either get it in my profile or there's an activity page. It's on the activity.
I downloaded that finally. Downloaded that finally. I just didn't know how many pages. You had said something about the 5th page, and I was wondering if you were just reading off the first 5 pages of it, or if you'd gone deeper into the document. The Canadian Determination Act, I mean.
Yeah, I did go deeper into it. I went right to the very end. That's where the interpret who the beneficial person includes.
Okay. All right, I'll just read the whole thing. No big deal.
Yeah, and then you'll notice that I actually added a couple links for the blogs too, to take you right to actual specific information. Because the blogs I added stuff in bold and everything, so it kind of stands out.
Yeah, that's what I was reading, but there was only 1 page there.
Okay, well this goes with that then.
Okay.
And then I guess we could, because that hereditaments, that shouldn't take long. And then I guess we'll finish off with any court questions or anything, so we can start maybe doing some moot stuff, like moot courts and stuff, and helping people getting up to speed on getting the documents done and what all they're gonna kind of expect going through this.
Yeah, go through it.
Interesting. One little thing you mentioned way back in the call about, and I appreciate it was just said in general terms about driving around with no number plates. From my more recent understanding, they actually do issue you one, so that you don't draw attention to yourself. But it is of a different nature, shall we say. And since I learned about that, I've been paying particular attention. And every now and again, I do spot the odd registration, which is definitely off the normal format, but it's definitely English as well. So there might be some evidence that that's correct, that information. Because obviously they don't want you driving around, appearing to be different.
That's right, yeah. It seems
like a chameleon job.
The ones that I've seen, it seems like it's a federal plate with no.
I saw you guys discussing that a few days ago.
With no expiry tags or anything, because in Canada, even the government plates, they have stickers on them to say what year it expires in, right? And I've actually been noticing some that have no stickers whatsoever. It's just a straight Canada plate with just a number on it, and that's it.
But in terms of one little aspect, if I may, a little question for you, just to help my own clarity on it. My understanding is that as long as we're represented by our allegiance or corporate person, we are acting under limited liability. And let's be honest, the biggest business on the planet is insurance, because everybody has to be indemnified from harm by another. So even your national insurance number or your social security number is a form of insurance in that respect. But if you're operating in the private, you have to stand on your full, what's the wording now? Full liability, commercial liability, yeah. So, okay, you have this where you discussed 40 million, whatever. So theoretically, you could meet every claim. But there's going to be a transition period where you're vulnerable, where you may not have that in place. So you'll be in kind of no man's land, or demilitarized zone, whatever you want to call it, DMZ. But I'm just interested how you see life on the other side. How you would, there's going to be certain things that need careful consideration, I would have thought. And certain rules must be in place that you don't appear to do damage back in the public, or create any sort of issues or injuries in the public, not physical injuries so much. And we all know the principle is being made whole and all that kind of stuff, but I'm talking more in terms of they got a pretty good scam going, and they don't want you marching in and unsettling all the people who are asleep in the dream, basically, or waking people up or drawing attention to the fact that, as we discussed earlier, you're different. So at some point, it'd be good. I'd be interested in your opinion of, or how you visualize things after you've completed this process. Would you even be allowed to talk to people who were still in the public, so to speak?
Are you free?
Would you be able, could you reach back into the public and talk to people? Could you have a Facebook account?
Just as David, you guys want to tackle this one?
I do come up with them, don't I? Give me credit.
Oh no, it's a good question. We've already answered it. I was just wondering if one of the other guys wanted to tackle answering it.
Well, the best way to learn is to teach. So come on and teach.
Exactly. Yeah. Anybody?
What was the question about the Facebook and?
No, I'm just saying that. What's your? How do you envisage things when you've completed this process, in terms of what you can and cannot do? I mean, first of all, you're not on limited liability anymore, so you're going to have to cover any situations if you do harm to another. Things like passports, having a Facebook account. How are you going to move from one country to another? Can you have a public image, as it were, that's out there? You're still going to be on LinkedIn and Facebook. You're going to send your kids to public school, or are you going to send them to state school? Or are you going to teach them at home? You're going to use private health care? And if you did, what kind of private health care? Because there's different kinds.
Okay, so I think I can sum it up. I know where you're going here. And everything's determined by your actions, right? So you're going to know where you're going with your end game.
Yeah.
Okay, so insurance is going to be all dealt with, obviously, by exchanging something right off the bat. So the hospitals, I know in the US, they all take money. I don't know how it's going to be done in Canada. I'm assuming the same way. You give them money. So if you're in a repaired state, a repairable state, you give them the money to repair you, and that's it. There is no help. The
first thing they're going to do before they treat you is they want a name to put on their paperwork, because they also are worried that you might sue them, and they have to keep themselves protected against any claim. So you have to know who the parties to the contract are. It brings about a lot of
questions. You need to look up the word.
You got to remember that all these corporations are working for a fee. So it's not having a name and all the information that's the vital factor. It's the fee.
Okay, but aren't we?
If you give them If you go in and just claim your land and don't go after what your share of the corporation, then you're going to come out of this with no funds. You've got to create...
but even if you've got the funds, what I'm saying is, let's say you've got unlimited funds, so you can pay for the best healthcare. Majority of places that you try and interact with, bearing in mind it's still a contract law society, are going to want certain information. They're going to want to know your status, name, address, blah, 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 before they'll even process working for you.
Okay, I can help.
Saying?
Yeah. Okay, you got to remember that this is the same thing as looking at how the current belief is on dimensions. How somebody from a different dimension can be sitting right beside you, and yet they can walk right through you, and you wouldn't know it.
Hey, I have no doubt there are people walking right past me every day who could well be, having made it through, or perhaps they never had to extricate themselves from the system.
Okay, but I was using that as an analogy where one dimension cannot interact with the other, right?
This is why I was trying to explain it with the control person. You literally have to wear the control person to do that.
So
I'm just thinking you could create another entity, couldn't you?
Well, why would you? You don't have to.
Okay.
Everybody that's in English law has chosen to descend and not own anything. So that's why they have to have everything insured, because they don't own it. Right? So everybody in the donor capacity owns that thing. So if you're in the donor capacity and you're driving down the street and you accidentally bump into somebody's car or something, you didn't do it on purpose. You're now bound, right? So now you're bound by the rules of nature. So
you would compensate them. Yeah.
I would hope you would compensate them, considering you have the knowledge that you have.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Otherwise you shouldn't be in nature, right? You wouldn't want, even though they chose to be in fee simple, you still don't want to see them screwed just because you can screw them.
Would intend to do that at all? Yeah.
Right, you see where I'm going at with that?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's all about honor, dishonor. Go on.
That's right. So you don't need any insurance because they have everything of yours. They have insurance, so if they damage what you have, their insurance company is going to cover it. Right? Yeah. So and about traveling and all that stuff, now that you're in your own jurisdiction, just like I was saying, freedom depends on those people in that territory and what their beliefs are. So if you think that you can be a donor and go into a territory that does not recognize donors, and everybody inside that territory is a slave, and if you think you can just march through there because of what your beliefs are against the beliefs of those people, you're going to end up being the slave. Right? So what you would do is you'd make sure that before you even enter that territory, the one that controls that territory is the one you get in an agreement with, right?
Right.
To make
so
sure
you would travel under a private agreement.
That's right. So that's your treaty between another for your agreement that says, okay, I can cross.
In which case, you would go through the private side of the airport or the port. Yeah.
No, you could still go through as just a regular Joe, but because you already got it all set up, because you got to remember it's a corporation, right? If I owned Walmart and you were a cashier of Walmart, you don't know me. You're a cashier. You've never met me in my life. So if I send Justin to Walmart and I say, Justin, yeah, you can have that tent. Just go to this store and pick it up off the shelf and walk out the door. Right? Or go to the cashier, right, and tell them that the owner sent you. Are you gonna believe him when he comes up to the cashier and just tells you, hey, the owner said that I can have this? No.
Of course not.
Right? So because I understand what's going on, right? I would know that I would have to give Justin either a Walmart card, a gift card, right? Or give him some sort of information that will allow him to get through there, right? Or I have to contact the cashier that I'm going to send him through.
I was very pleased you come up with this. So basically, you're saying that once you've made it through, they are going to help us because they'll provide us with these things so we don't harm the very system that, you know, we're not wishing to harm. So they may well, because there are different definitions of passport, for instance.
This is why you can claim your corporate interest. That's how you prevent it, right? Because you'll be given all this multitude of money, which you'll be able to exchange.
Well, also don't forget that the system, these people that are in this position that you'd be speaking to, they know the system's a scam. They know they don't have any right to all the natural resources or anything else there. So when you're within their territory, they know your capacity. So if you did end up having to go to the hospital or anything else, you're already in the system where they won't even be able to charge you. That'll already be on there saying just send it to here. Send the check to this person.
Yeah.
Right? And it'll be under the seal holder of that state. And you know, if you're holding the seal, something saying stamped by the seal holder, right, by the owner, right? Like if Justin walked through that cashier and he had that stamp by the owner of Walmart saying he can do that, are you gonna dispute it? No. If anything, you might take it to your manager to get it authenticated, to make sure that it's legit, right? Just to protect your ass. But that's it. Once you protected your ass, you're gonna come back to Justin and say, "Hey, here you go, buddy. Give her shit," right? Because now it's not my issue because I got it determined by the person that higher up. Right? That person's going to have to worry about if anything was wrong. Right? So that's kind of how the corporation things work. So when we realize that this is capacity and everybody within English law don't actually have any right to anything they have. Right? You kind of see what I'm getting at. So that the biggest thing that comes in is the laws of nature. Right, realizing that they made that choice and everything else, and just because one man cannot own the whole planet, you can't claim that everything that everybody has is yours. You kind of see what I'm getting at? You can only really claim the things that you actually need. So by them giving you such a huge trust account and everything else, doesn't that cover anything that you could ever want that you could for entertainment or anything else?
Yeah, I accept that. That's not a problem. As I said, it just comes back to how we interact with their system. And I think they would, it's reasonable to suppose, they will make provision for that. I think they would.
Well, that's what the treaties are, because you got to remember, when you have your own land territory, now you're on your own lands.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And then it's all about treaties. Yeah.
Now it's all about treaties. How do other territories work with other territories, and how have they always worked? Right? It's always been by an agreement. So a treaty is an agreement, nothing more. Right? Just like a law. So once that's exactly what they all mean. So once you both agree to it, right, and you both give it your consent, now that's law and jurisdiction, right? So, when we actually just strip it down to the very basic, simplest factors of all these things, they really answer everything all to themselves with very simply, right? So, because it's all about capacity.
Check that.
So even traveling, they can't. They can't if it's a common law jurisdiction, they can't even tell you that you can't travel through there. You wouldn't need a passport. But again, that's right. Knowing that, trying to go through a cashier that doesn't have any idea. Right now, we're talking about Border Patrol, and look how they treat people that they assume authority over. Right? Yeah. Do you really want to
assume authority in every aspect, don't they?
That's right. So, do you want to go through that, or would you rather get that worked out before you even go?
This is why it's important to proof their restriction in their law, their jurisdictions.
That's right. They are restricted by their own law, and that's all you need to know. And that's why once you get to the donor capacity, when you start wanting to do these things, it's not going to be anything that we've seen we get as people get as citizens, right? Because they're not allowed to do that stuff for citizens. It's against the law.
This is why they do this whole red carpet show for Hollywood and entertainment.
Yeah.
The thin red line. They walk on it.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
That's exactly it.
It's no different than how you sign on your check, which if you look at it in a magnifying glass, it's actually words that you're writing on top, not a line.
Oh, yeah, we know all about that. Although they don't actually appear anymore.
It's the same thing that they're doing, though, with the red carpet.
Yeah.
Yeah, just blow it up so they can walk on it, that's all.
Stars.
But yeah, it's because it's all about capacity. That's where we have to change our mind. This is about capacity. This is the difference between being a king and being a subject of the king, right? Like somebody like the king's the one that cleans the toilet for the king. It's that big of a difference, right? Citizen cleans the toilet for the king. Reversion is being the king, except for you don't have any subjects and you don't have any right over anybody else.
No, wouldn't expect to.
Right. So that's why everything that you do, you have to be in agreement with. So once you're in your natural capacity, if you see two guys punching each other out, you can't go up there and do anything. You can run up there and say, "Can I help either one of you?" And if both of them say no, you can't do anything. You gotta just let them go at it. Nothing you can do. That's what they do. If they want to kill themselves by doing that, that's hey. Right? It's only the group, the equitable group, that can change that. Right? Where now you can't fight you can't fight now. Right? Because you're not yourself. Right? And plus they're using things that are in trust to you. Right? Because usually things get damaged and right? It just escalates. Because you'll notice that English law is actually about the things in trust, not the person. It's when you take those things in trust that they end up making you responsible for it.
Very much so. Well, you're giving me a lot to sleep on tonight.
That's good.
If I can.
But yeah, this has been I think 6 hours now, hasn't it? Well, at least 4.
I have 4 here. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Yeah, it was a great chat. If anybody wants to do because I'm working on this Canadian ownership rate every day now. So if anybody wants to have a meeting with me and work with me during the days with them, just let me know. And otherwise,
yeah, I'll schedule something with you, William, for tomorrow. I want to look into this more now.
And Wednesday, I guess we'll just carry on with the other stuff.
Yeah, Wednesday's cool. What sort of time, as in Greenwich Mean Time, do you have in mind?
Wednesday, 10 p.m. Was it 10 p.m. GMT?
Yeah, because I was looking for you at 10 o'clock. But we're on British summertime. Sorry, winter time. So I ended up joining an hour late because I kind of got it wrong.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, no, we try to do always on GMT. So
yeah, that's fine. So it'd be when you say 10 o'clock, you mean 9, really? I think.
No, GMT's GMT. That's what we're on at the moment.
Yeah,
exactly.
The GMT is your standard time because when I say GMT, 10 GMT, that's 3 o'clock for us in the afternoon.
2 o'clock for me. Yeah.
No wonder why you're so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Yeah. So that's it's up at 2:15 in the morning here.
Yeah, well, the guys.
So how come you started? I can't fathom out then how you started an hour ahead of ahead of us. Because I joined the call about 10 o'clock. And yet you reckon what the first thing I spoke about, you said, go back and listen earlier in the call. And it looked like you'd already been going an hour.
Yeah, we started about 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll jump on
But
a
that's-
couple hours before to do some discussion, and then for the 10 p.m., that's when we hit the main area topic.
Okay.
Just so
All
that
right, yeah.
just so that at 10 p.m. we're not meeting up, and then we're doing 6 o'clock or 6 hours from 10 p.m. We can kind of distribute it before.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting a lot of time on things.
I appreciate everybody
Yeah,
taking time to look at it, because like that's we need everybody to look at it for us to be able to have true freedoms, because we're basically bound by the ignorance around us. So
Of course.
Eating
Yeah.
of the minds.
Kind of what I was saying earlier. Yeah.
All right, well, good call, guys. I'm gonna end it here and put the kids to bed. So,
okay,
all right, have a good one.
message
night,
me
all.
later, guys.
Thank
On
you.
the time you guys want to meet.
Yeah, thank you again. It's been very enlightening.
Yeah, great call.
Great.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.